Find what you love and let it kill you. It's a famous quote often attributed to the poet Charles Bukowski. The sentiment behind it is strangely comforting. Death is inevitable, so why not go out doing what lights you up inside? Maybe even a short life lived with passion beats a long life without it. But it also contradicts the popular notion that pursuing your dreams, and better yet, achieving them, means that you will live a happy life. Once you find your passion, your dream job, it's assumed everything will fall into place. But countless people have gotten to the other side of their dreams only to realize that a different level just means different devils. The truth is that there is no cheat code to escape pain. There is only choosing, sometimes if you're very lucky, what you're suffering for. Maybe the best we can hope for is to spend our lives consumed by something that feels meaningful. And throughout history, there have been people who did exactly that. People who became so devoted to their passion that it ultimately became the thing that killed them. Katia Conrad was born April 17, 1942, in Guebwiller, France. She found a passion for volcanoes early on in her childhood and went on to study physics and chemistry at the University of Strasbourg. Maurice Krafft was born March 25, 1946, in Mulhouse, France. He first became interested in volcanoes during a family trip to Naples and Stromboli when he was 7 years old. He went on to study geology at the same university as Katia, where the two eventually met. The couple married in 1970 and honeymooned at Stromboli, where they spent their time photographing its near-continuous eruption. They decided not to have kids, instead devoting their lives to the pursuit, documentation, and research of volcanoes. Katia took photographs. Maurice filmed. They were volcanologists for love, documentarians for money. The photos and videos they published helped raise funding for their trips and research. The inherent danger of their profession was a truth they acknowledged many times in interviews. Every time they climbed up an active volcano to marvel at its power and document it for the rest of the world to see, they risked inhalation from toxic gas, severe or even life-threatening burns from lava bombs, or getting swept up into pyroclastic flows. In one interview, Maurice talked about camping out with Katia on an active volcano. The two slept in shifts so that one could wake the other if a lava bomb was thrown in their direction. Some of my friends would say I'm nuts, Maurice once said. But if tomorrow I would die in a volcano, I would be satisfied that I have seen enough. But despite the risks they took, the couple often used their platform to advocate for safety around volcanoes. But even experts sometimes miscalculate. In early June of 1991, Katia and Maurice traveled to the Shimabara Peninsula in Japan to document and film the eruption of Mount Unzen. On June 3rd, they set up their camera at the base of the 4,485-foot mountain. The precipitation and fog made it hard for them to see, so they moved a little closer. They assumed that they were safe about 3.2 kilometers away from the volcano. Then a lava dome collapsed, triggering a fast-moving pyroclastic flow. An avalanche of volcanic rock, gas, and ash cascaded down the hill, heading straight towards them. Marks on the earth indicate that they were next to each other when they died. 2 items were found to identify them: a camera and a watch with its hands frozen at 4:18 p.m. Their love affair, both with one another and volcanoes, is beautifully documented in the film Fire of Love. The Kraffts understood volcanoes as something to observe, document, and respect. But not everyone who enters the wild is looking to observe it from a distance. Timothy Treadwell was born on April 29, 1957, in Mineola, Long Island, New York, where he was one of 5 children. He was the star diver on his high school swim team. He attended Bradley University on a swimming and diving scholarship where he often told people he was a British orphan, but eventually dropped out. After college, he relocated to Los Angeles, California in pursuit of launching an acting career. This dream didn't end up working out, and he began struggling with substance abuse and alcoholism. In 1989, 2001, after a near-fatal heroin overdose, a 32-year-old Treadwell traveled to Alaska's Katmai National Park. It was here that Treadwell had his first up-close encounter with a bear. He described it as looking into the face of a kindred soul. He proceeded to spend 13 consecutive summers at the park, living among the coastal brown bears. Out in the wilderness, he could be free from all the pain and rejection of the civilized world. He believed he had developed a bond with these animals, assuming that the bears never attacked him because they loved him. He gave them names and would sing and read to them. Treadwell filmed more than 100 hours of footage during his expeditions and produced a large collection of photographs. His daring proximity allowed him to capture rare moments of the private world of grizzly bears. He was known for getting dangerously close to the bears he observed, sometimes petting them and playing with bear cubs. The National Park Service regularly expressed their concerns about Treadwell's lack of caution, and he received at least 6 violations between the years of 1994 and 2003, which included citations for improper food storage, wildlife harassment, and conflicts with visitors and their guides. He paid little mind to these warnings, seeing it as his personal mission to protect the bears. By 2001, Treadwell had gained enough media attention that he began making frequent public appearances as an environmental activist. He traveled throughout the United States to educate school children about bears. He appeared on the Discovery Channel, The Late Show with David Letterman, and Dateline NBC. Timothy Treadwell arrived back at his campsite in Katmai National Park for his 13th and final summer in late July 2003. He invited his girlfriend Amy Huguenard to accompany him. Treadwell and Huguenard had planned on leaving at his usual time of the year, but following an argument with the airline over the price of altering his return ticket, they decided to return to the campsite and stay for an extra week. They were in the park later than Treadwell had ever stayed in the past, and they had set their campsite near a salmon stream where wild bears commonly fed in autumn. Bears begin preparing for hibernation in late summer and early fall. During this time, they eat almost constantly, consuming up to 20,000 calories and gaining several pounds to build up the fat reserves they need to survive an entire winter without food and water. Unfortunately for Treadwell and Huguenard, food was scarce that autumn. The bears that Treadwell was familiar with during the summer had already gone into hibernation, and bears from other parts of the park that he didn't know began moving into the area. Some of the last footage Treadwell ever took was mere hours before his death. He recorded a bear repeatedly diving into the water in search of dead salmon. In the footage, he stated that the bear must have been getting restless since it was running out of time to find food before hibernation. On October 6, an air taxi pilot named Willie Fulton arrived at the campsite to pick up Treadwell and Huguenard, but found the area abandoned except for a large male bear. He contacted local park rangers who quickly descended on the scene to discover the couple's mangled remains and the large bear guarding their campsite. The bear was promptly shot dead, and an on-site necropsy revealed human body parts such as fingers and limbs. An audio recording of the attack was also found among the remains. This was the first known incident of a person being killed by a bear in the 85-year history of the park being open. The recording of the gruesome attack was given to Treadwell's ex-girlfriend Jewel, who has never released it to the public. 2 years after the incident, Treadwell's story was covered in Werner Herzog's documentary Grizzly Man. Herzog used footage captured by Treadwell in the last 5 years of his life. He also captured interviews of his friends and family, as well as park rangers and nature experts. Herzog expressed his simultaneous respect and criticism of Treadwell's action, and his over-idealization in the face of nature. Timothy Treadwell believed he had found connection in the wild, but his fate is a reminder of nature's unpredictability and dangerous indifference. Steve Irwin was a conservationist, environmentalist, and TV personality born in 1962 in Melbourne, Australia. His life with wildlife began almost immediately. His parents ran a small reptile and fauna park, and from the time he was a child, Irwin was surrounded by snakes, lizards, crocodiles, and injured animals in need of care. Steve became particularly fascinated with crocodiles, helping his father capture and relocate problem crocodiles from populated areas across Australia. By the age of 9, he was already wrestling crocodiles himself. In 1996, Steve and his wife Terry launched The Crocodile Hunter, a wildlife documentary series that quickly exploded in popularity around the world after being picked up by the Discovery Channel. Beyond just his bravery, it was Steve's enthusiasm for wildlife that made him stand out. He went on to appear in other shows such as Croc Files and The Crocodile Hunter Diaries. He was shown wrestling crocodiles, handling venomous snakes, and diving alongside sharks. He used his fame to advocate for wildlife protection, habitat preservation, and environmental education. On September 4, 2006, Steve was in Bat Reef, a coral reef located off the coast of Port Douglas, Queensland, Australia. He was snorkeling in shallow waters and filming for his documentary series Ocean's Deadliest when he happened upon a short-tail stingray. It was an animal generally considered gentle and non-aggressive except for when they defended themselves. It's suspected that as Steve approached the animal, it mistook his shadow for a tiger shark, a natural predator of the rays. The stingray became aggressive and began launching attacks with its venomous barbed tail, one which struck Steve directly in the heart. Blood poured from his chest and clouded the water as his crew continued filming the gruesome scene. They dragged him back to the boat and rushed to the nearest hospital, where he was pronounced dead upon arrival. The tape of the fatal accident was handed over to authorities to be investigated before being returned to his wife, who destroyed the video so it would never be seen by the public. The irony is that throughout his life, Steve had survived encounters with some of the most dangerous animals on Earth, but the creature that killed him was something generally considered calm and non-aggressive. Marie Curie, born Maria Salomea Sklodowska on November 7, 1867 in Warsaw, Poland, was a revolutionary physicist and chemist at a time when women were largely excluded from higher education and scientific institutions. She showed intense curiosity about the natural world and high intelligence from a young age, completing high school at only 15 years old, but was barred from traditional university on the basis of her gender. She continued her scientific education informally by enrolling in the Flying University, also known as the Floating University, which secretly offered classes in ever-changing locations during the 19th and early 20th century. During her studies, she also worked as a governess and tutor for years to help financially support her family. At the age of 24, she moved to Paris to attend the Sorbonne, often surviving on little more than bread and tea. She studied relentlessly, earning degrees in both physics and mathematics. She soon met fellow scientist Pierre Curie, a man whose fascination with scientific discovery mirrored her own. The two fell in love, married, and began working side by side in a cramped lab where they chased an invisible mystery hidden deep inside matter itself. At the time, scientists had only just begun to understand the strange phenomenon of radiation, but Marie Curie became obsessed with it. Together, the Curies discovered two new radioactive elements. They named the first one polonium, after Marie's hometown Poland, and the second was called radium. Radium glowed blue in the dark and became marketed as a miracle cure since early experiments showed radiation could shrink tumors. Exaggerations claimed that radium could treat a myriad of ailments including arthritis, cancer, impotence, and even aging. Companies infused radium into watch dials, compasses, toothpaste, cosmetics, chocolate, and bottled water. Curie would sometimes keep samples of radium beside her bed at night because she thought it was so beautiful. At the time, nobody knew about the long-term effects of radiation exposure. Marie Curie handled radioactive materials constantly with little to no protection. She carried test tubes in her pockets, worked for hours breathing in radioactive dust, and touched dangerous substances directly with her bare hands, day after day, year after year. The work practically consumed her. After her husband's sudden death in 1906, Curie continued her research despite her grief, public scrutiny, and worsening health. During World War I, she helped develop mobile X-ray units that helped battlefield medics treat wounded soldiers near the front lines. By then, decades of radiation exposure had slowly destroyed her body from the inside out. Her bone marrow had deteriorated, and her immune system was severely weakened. In 1934, Marie Curie died of aplastic anemia caused by prolonged exposure to radiation. Even today, over 90 years later, some of her notebooks and personal belongings remain so radioactive that they must still be stored inside lead-lined containers. Her coffin is also encased in nearly an inch of lead to protect the public from ongoing radiation. Because of the extremely long half-life of radium, her body will be radioactive for at least the next 1,500 years. By the time the world understood the dangers of radiation, Marie Curie had already given her life to it. For some people, fear is something to avoid, or at most, a necessary obstacle that must be endured. For others, it becomes the very thing that makes them feel alive. Carl Boenish, born 1941 in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, was an American freefall cinematographer and is considered the father of modern base jumping. His obsession with flight began at a young age. Early in his life, Boenish worked as an electrical engineer for Hughes Aircraft, but his profession left him bored and restless. He began directing his energy and engineering expertise to his two true passions, filmmaking and skydiving. Over the next 15 years, he successfully completed over 1,000 jumps from planes before he started craving an even greater rush. And base jumping was born. The acronym represents the 4 categories of fixed objects that jumpers leap from. B is for buildings, such as skyscrapers and other structures. A is for antennas, such as radio masts, transmission towers, or cranes. S is for span, such as bridges or other objects that span a gap. And E is for earth, such as cliffs, mountains, or other natural earth formations. It's exceedingly more dangerous than jumping from an airplane since it is an extreme sport with practically no margin for error. Unlike skydivers who jump from thousands of feet in the air, base jumpers typically jump from heights ranging from just 300 to 2,000 feet high. This gives them only seconds to deploy their parachutes. They also risk collisions with structures in the surrounding area where improper body positioning or unexpected wind gusts can lead to fatal accidents. In 1978, Boenish invited a group of experienced skydivers to jump with him off the summit of El Capitan in California's Yosemite National Park, while he recorded the daring feat. Other parachutists were inspired by the idea and also began traveling to the park to jump from the summit, leading to several arrests. Boenish taught his wife Jean Boenish to jump as well. Extreme sports psychologists have investigated the psychology behind adrenaline-seeking activities like base jumping. The fear of falling is matched by excitement. Each second that a jumper falls, their speed accelerates to over 100 miles per hour. The body experiences an accelerating heartbeat and rising blood pressure that creates a dopamine hit. To people like Boenish, the mixture of stress, fear, and euphoria experienced when the parachute opens and a jumper lands safely on the ground can become an almost addictive feeling. Throughout the late 1970s and early 80s, Boenish and his wife Jean helped push the sport into the public eye through documentaries and increasingly dangerous jumps. But nowhere captivated Boenish more than the Troll Wall in Norway, the tallest vertical rock face in Europe. On July 7, 1984, Boenish successfully completed a base jump from the massive cliffside. Friends later recalled that he was ecstatic afterwards, energized by the jump and eager to go again. He climbed back up for a second jump, but something went wrong. After leaping from the cliff, Boenish's parachute deployment failed to properly stabilize. He struck the rocks below and died at the base of the mountain at 43 years old. 2 days later, his wife Jean performed the same jump from the cliffside, telling reporters that Carl would have wanted life to go on. For people like Carl and Jean, perhaps risking death is simply the price they choose to pay for the freedom and joy of the sport. Maybe the desire to participate in such a dangerous sport goes beyond any kind of rational explanation. Or perhaps getting so close to death gives them a new perspective on life and mortality. Each jump survived is a reminder to live life without fear or reservation. After all, what could be more frightening than willingly jumping off the side of a cliff? Boenish once said, "Happy are those who dream dreams and are willing to pay the price to see them come true." Maybe that's what all of this really is. Not accidents or irony, but choice. If these people had known how their stories would end, some of them might have chosen differently. Some of them still probably wouldn't have. There's something deeply human about the willingness to risk everything for something that feels meaningful. Most people won't die in pursuit of a passion. Many people slowly abandon the things that make them feel alive altogether. And maybe that's its own kind of tragedy. Not that we love things too intensely, but that eventually we often stop loving anything intensely enough to risk ourselves for it.